A group of friends decided to spend their summer vacation at a remote lake about which they had only heard rumors. Alex, Jason, Katie, and Megan had long wanted to escape the hustle and bustle of the city and enjoy the peace of nature. Alex found the place on the internet, and it seemed like the perfect spot for camping. When they arrived at the lake, a local elder, an old man with a white beard, warned them, "This lake is cursed. Those who entered its waters never returned. Stay away from it." But the young people laughed at his words and decided it was just local legends meant to scare tourists. They set up their tents right by the shore, lit a fire, and began cooking dinner. The sun gradually set, and darkness began to creep in. Megan, who always loved mysticism, suggested telling scary stories. Everyone agreed. Jason started. "They say there used to be a settlement here, and the lake served as a water source for the locals. But one day the water began to turn black, and strange creatures started emerging from it. People disappeared without a trace, and eventually the village became deserted." Everyone laughed, but the atmosphere around them grew a bit tense. They decided to go to sleep, but before bed, Megan wanted to take a walk along the shore. Alex decided to keep her company. They walked, talking about old legends, when they suddenly noticed something strange on the water's surface. "Do you see that?" Megan whispered, pointing to a black figure emerging from the water. Alex pulled her close and began to peer into the darkness. The figure vanished as if it had never been there. "Maybe we're just getting nervous because of these stories," Alex said, trying to reassure both himself and Megan. They returned to the tents where Katie and Jason were already waiting for them. The night passed relatively quietly, but early in the morning, Katie woke up to a strange noise. She peeked out of the tent and saw that Megan was gone. Everyone started to panic and searched around the camp, but to no avail. The only thing they found was her footprints leading to the lake and disappearing at the shore. "We have to find her!" Jason shouted, but everyone understood that without outside help, they wouldn't be able to do anything. They decided to return to town and call the police. The police arrived quickly and started the investigation. They combed the area around the lake but found no trace of Megan. The local sheriff, Jim, explained that this wasn't the first disappearance at this lake. Over the past few years, many people had gone missing here, and all of them left footprints leading to the water. Alex, Jason, and Katie couldn't accept that Megan had vanished without a trace. They decided to stay and continue the search on their own. That evening, they went back to the lake. Alex brought a flashlight and some ropes in case he needed to dive into the water. As they approached the lake, Jason noticed a strange glimmer on the water's surface. He walked closer and saw something that looked like a silver coin. "Look at this," he said, picking up the object. Suddenly, a black hand emerged from the water and grabbed his leg. Jason screamed as he was pulled into the depths of the lake. Alex rushed after him, trying to pull his friend out, but it was futile. Jason disappeared underwater, leaving only ripples on the surface. Katie began to cry and scream, but Alex, despite his fear, decided not to back down. He knew he had to find an answer to what was happening there. They returned to the tents and tried to gather their thoughts. Alex remembered the old man who had warned them about the danger of the lake. They decided to find him and learn more. The old man lived in a small hut near the lake. He greeted them warmly and said he knew they would return. "I tried to warn you," he said. "This lake has taken many, and now it wants more. There used to be a temple dedicated to an ancient water spirit, and this spirit still resides in the depths of the lake. It takes those who approach its domain." Alex asked how they could save their friends and stop the horror. The old man replied that there was only one way. They had to find and destroy the artifact that bound the spirit to the lake. This artifact was hidden in the deepest part of the lake. The next morning, Alex and Katie prepared everything needed for diving. They knew it was their only chance to save Megan and Jason. Katie stayed on the shore while Alex plunged into the cold waters of the lake. The water was dark and murky. Alex swam deeper, trying to find any trace of the artifact. Suddenly, he saw a strange glimmer. Swimming closer, he saw an ancient statue holding a crystal. But as soon as he tried to take it, black figures began to appear around him. These were those who had disappeared in the lake's waters. They reached out to Alex, trying to stop him. Alex fought desperately, trying to pry the crystal from the statue. Finally, he managed to do it, and at that moment, the water around him began to churn. He surfaced, holding the crystal. Katie helped him out of the water. They understood that they had to destroy the crystal to put an end to the curse once and for all. Alex threw the crystal with all his might onto the rocks, and it shattered into 1,000 pieces. The lake's water became clear, and from the depths, the bodies of the missing people began to rise. Among them were Megan and Jason. They looked alive, but something was wrong. Their eyes were empty, like those of dolls. Suddenly, the lake's water started to turn black again. Dark figures reappeared and dragged Megan and Jason back into the depths. Alex and Katie tried to save them, but it was futile. Their last screams faded into the darkness. Alex and Katie remained on the shore, shivering in horror. They realized that the curse would never end and that they were now doomed too. The lake doesn't let go of its victims. As they tried to escape, black hands emerged from the water and pulled them into the cold depths, where eternal darkness awaited them. The Fisher family had long dreamed of a vacation. Finally, they had the opportunity to spend their holidays at a new luxurious resort on the coast of California. Mr. Fisher, John, a successful lawyer, his wife Elizabeth, a teacher, and their 2 children, 16-year-old Sarah and 12-year-old Tom, hoped for an unforgettable holiday. When they arrived at the resort, they were greeted warmly. The Golden Coast Resort was truly a wonder. A huge pool, beautiful beaches, luxurious rooms, and plenty of entertainment for the whole family. At the reception, they were welcomed by a smiling girl named Anna, who handed them the keys to their suite and invited them to an evening banquet. On the first evening, everything seemed perfect. However, when night fell, everything changed. Sarah woke up to strange whispers. She went out onto the balcony and saw figures in white robes on the beach. They silently stood, looking at her. Sarah screamed, and her parents rushed to her cries. The next morning, John asked at the reception if anyone else had seen people in white robes on the beach, but Anna assured him it was just a night dream. However, Sarah was convinced it was not a dream. The next day, the Fishers decided to explore the resort. They found an old mansion, half overgrown with ivy. They were surprised that such a place was left abandoned in the middle of a luxurious resort. John asked one of the workers about this mansion, but he only replied that it was better to stay away from it. That night, Sarah saw the ghostly people again. She woke Tom, and they decided to go to the old mansion. Inside, they found old books, photographs, and strange symbols on the walls. In one of the rooms, they came across an old diary that told the story of a family that lived there many years ago. It turned out that this mansion was built on the site of an ancient Native American cemetery, and all the inhabitants of the mansion died under mysterious circumstances. The next day, Sarah and Tom told their parents about their discovery. John decided to talk to the resort manager. He demanded an explanation, but the manager only smiled and said these were just legends. The Fishers began to notice strange things. Elizabeth saw the reflection of an old man in the mirror, who disappeared when she turned around. Tom heard a child crying, coming from the old mansion. One evening, when John returned to their room, he found the family distressed. Sarah was convinced she saw ghosts in the old mansion. John decided it was time to uncover the truth. He took a flashlight and went to the mansion with Elizabeth. Inside, it was dark and cold. They walked through the corridors, feeling the walls for anything unusual. Suddenly, they heard footsteps behind them. Turning around, they saw a figure of a woman in white, disappearing into the darkness. They decided to follow her. the woman led them to a room where an old fireplace stood. Suddenly, the fireplace lit up, and they saw the figure of an old man before them. He began to tell the story of how his family was destroyed by spirits when they settled in this place. He warned that no one could live on this cursed land, and that their fate would be as tragic as his family's if they did not leave the resort immediately. Frightened, John and Elizabeth returned to their children. They decided that the best thing would be to leave the resort as soon as possible. However, when they started packing, the door to their room suddenly locked. They tried to open the windows, but they were all sealed by an invisible force. Richard vanished into the darkness, leaving Melanie alone with her terror. She cried, trembling with fear, not understanding what was happening. Her body was paralyzed with fright, and she had no idea where to go next. Time seemed to stand still, and she lost her sense of reality. Suddenly, Tom's scream echoed from the depths of the maze. Melanie gathered all her strength and ran toward the sound. She pushed through the thick hedges, feeling the branches scratch her skin, but she didn't stop. She had to find her friends. Finally, she found Tom, who was kneeling with his hands on his head. He looked crazed with fear, his eyes wide open, and his lips murmuring something unintelligible. Melanie ran to him and tried to calm him down. "Tom, it's me, Melanie. We need to find a way out of here." She held his shoulders, trying to bring him back to reality. But Tom didn't respond. He continued to murmur about the darkness and fear. Melanie was even more frightened, not knowing what to do. She looked around, trying to find any sign of where to go next. Suddenly, she saw Jennifer. She was standing a few meters away, motionless, as if enchanted. Her eyes were empty, and she looked like she had lost all will to fight. Melanie rushed to her, trying to wake her up. "Jennifer, we have to get out of here! Come on, wake up!" She shook her, but Jennifer didn't respond. Melanie felt panic engulf her from within. She didn't know how to help her friends, and felt that this maze had become a trap for their souls. She gathered all her strength and decided she had to find a way out herself, then come back for her friends. She ran forward without looking back. The whispers in the maze grew louder, turning into screams that haunted her. She ran, feeling her heart pounding in her chest, and every step felt like her last. Suddenly, she stumbled upon another clearing, where a huge mirror maze stood. The entrance was decorated with glittering LEDs that flickered in the darkness. Melanie felt this was her last chance to find a way out. She entered the mirror maze, trying to find the right path. But the mirrors reflected her fears, her doubts, her pain. She saw her reflections with distorted faces, whispering to her about hopelessness. She felt her mind slowly starting to give in. But she didn't stop. She knew she had to find the exit. Suddenly, she saw a light at the end of the corridor. It was a sign of the exit. She ran towards it, hoping it wasn't another trick. When she exited the mirror maze, she saw the figure in the dark cloak standing by the exit. The figure turned to her, and Melanie felt a cold terror envelop her. "You cannot escape," the figure said again, its voice echoing in Melanie's head like a bell. Melanie felt her body paralyzed with fear, but she didn't stop. She knew she had to fight. She took a step forward, trying to pass by the figure, but it grabbed her arm, and Melanie felt her consciousness begin to fade. "You will be part of this maze," the figure whispered, and its eyes glowed red. Melanie felt her mind engulfed by darkness, and the last thing she saw was the figure's face, smiling a sinister smile. Her body fell to the ground, and the figure disappeared into the shadows. The maze remained quiet and eerie. The friends never returned. The legend of the enchanted maze became even more terrifying, and the Dream World amusement park continued to attract new visitors, unaware of the horrors awaiting them within the green walls. No one knew that the souls of Richard, Tom, Jennifer, and Melanie were now forever trapped in the maze, doomed to wander in the darkness, haunted by their worst fears. Liz, Josh, and Mia decided to spend their vacation at a popular resort in Oregon, USA. This place promised an ideal retreat with sandy beaches, picturesque landscapes, and a variety of activities. They settled into a cozy lakeside cottage, and the first few days passed peacefully. One evening, sitting by the campfire, Liz told her friends about the old cabins they had noticed during a walk in the woods. "I heard those cabins have been abandoned for a long time, and the locals avoid them," she said, tossing a stick into the fire. "I wonder why." Josh, always curious and ready for adventure, suggested, "Let's explore them tomorrow. What could go wrong? They're just cabins." Mia hesitated, but eventually agreed. "All right, but we'll go only during the day," she said, trying to hide her unease. The next day, the trio set off to the cabins. Making their way through the dense forest, they finally arrived at the site. The cabins were in a dilapidated state, with boarded-up windows, half-open doors, and wild weeds growing all around. "This looks a bit creepy," Josh said, stepping forward. Liz and Mia followed, feeling the growing tension. They entered the first cabin. Inside, it was dark and damp. Dust covered everything they saw, and cobwebs hung from the corners. There was a musty smell in the air. "Look at this!" exclaimed Liz, pointing to an old coffee table where a yellow journal lay. She cautiously opened it and began to read aloud. "July 19th, 1932. This resort was our refuge until something horrible happened. At night, we heard whispers and screams, but when we went outside, there was no one there. People started disappearing one by one. We feared we would be next." The journal ended abruptly. "It's just old tales," Josh said defiantly, but Mia felt a chill of fear creeping over her. They left the first cabin and decided to inspect the others. The second cabin was even more run down, with its roof partially collapsed and the door hanging on one hinge. They entered and saw an old leather sofa with another yellowed letter on it. Josh picked it up and began to read. "August 4th, 1932. The number of missing people is growing. I can't stay here any longer, but I feel like something is holding us. Everyone who tried to leave never came back." "This is getting scarier," Mia whispered. "Maybe we should go back." "But we haven't explored the last cabin yet," Josh insisted, his curiosity outweighing his fear. The third cabin was the largest and oldest. They entered and saw a large rocking chair in the middle of the room. It was slowly rocking, as if someone had just gotten up. Old photographs of people hung on the wall, seeming to watch their every move. Suddenly, Liz felt someone touch her shoulder. She turned around, but there was no one there. "We need to leave," she said, her voice trembling. "This place has some horrible energy." They decided to return to their cottage. On the way back, Mia noticed something strange. Footprints leading from the cabins into the forest, disappearing among the trees. The sense of danger was growing. Back at the cottage, they felt exhausted and nervous. "Maybe we're just spooking ourselves," Josh tried to reassure everyone. "I'm not sure," Liz replied. "Those cabins, there's something there. I can feel it." All night they couldn't sleep, listening to every rustle and creak coming from outside. At dawn, Josh suggested, "We need to tell the local authorities, or at least the resort management. They need to know what's happening." However, when they tried to find someone who could help, they found out that all the locals avoided talking about the cabins. "That place is cursed," said one of the resort workers, quickly crossing himself. "You better stay away from it." The situation was becoming stranger, but Liz, Josh, and Mia decided not to give up. They understood that they had to find out the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. The next day, Liz, Josh, and Mia decided to return to the cabins. This time, they were better prepared. They brought flashlights, cameras, and recorders. They were determined to uncover the mystery of these creepy places. The path through the forest seemed even longer and gloomier. Upon reaching the cabins, they noticed new footprints on the ground, as if someone had recently been there. This only heightened their anxiety. "All right, let's start with the first cabin again," said Josh, lighting his flashlight. Liz and Mia nodded and entered. This time, they decided to explore every corner. Behind an old table, they found a hidden trapdoor leading to the basement. "This is what we were looking for," whispered Liz. They carefully opened the trapdoor and descended. The basement was dark and damp, and the air was even heavier. On the floor lay remnants of old furniture and some antique tools. On the walls, they noticed old charcoal inscriptions. "Help us. We are here forever. Evil comes at night." Liz's heart was pounding. She felt they were on the brink of something terrible. In the corner of the basement, they found an old wooden chest. Josh opened it, and inside they saw personal belongings, clothes, photographs, letters. They all belonged to people who had disappeared almost a century ago. "This is just incredible," whispered Mia. "But what happened to them?" Suddenly, they heard a noise from above. Liz quickly turned off the flashlight, and they froze, listening. The noise grew louder, as if someone was walking around the cabin. It seemed they were not alone. Deciding they should leave, they carefully climbed back up. But when they returned to the main room, they were met with an unpleasant surprise. The cabin door was locked and could only be opened from the inside. Panic engulfed them. "We need to find another way out," said Josh, trying to stay calm. They began to search for another exit, but at that moment they heard voices. It was the same whispers mentioned in the journal. The voice became louder and clearer, and they realized it was coming from another cabin. Deciding it was their only chance to find answers, they hurried there. When they entered the third cabin, where the rocking chair had been, they were met with a terrifying sight. In the corner sat an old woman with long gray hair, quietly muttering something. "Are you looking for the truth?" she said without raising her head. "You will not return from here, just like the others before you. The evil that dwells here does not let go of its victims." Mia was frightened and wanted to run, but Josh and Liz stayed put. "What happened here? Why did everyone disappear?" Josh asked. The old woman lifted her head, her eyes empty and lifeless. "You should never have come here. This place is cursed by ancient rituals performed on this land. Those who come here become part of this curse." Suddenly, they felt the ground beneath their feet start to tremble. Everything around them changed. The walls began to close in, and the room filled with thick fog. Liz, Josh, and Mia tried to find a way out, but it was too late. The fog enveloped them, and they felt themselves losing consciousness. When they woke up, they were back in the basement of the first cabin, but now they were not alone. Around them stood people in old-fashioned clothing, the same ones who had disappeared many years ago. They looked like ghosts, but their faces expressed endless longing and despair. "You are now with us," whispered one of the women. "You have become part of the curse." Liz felt a chill run down her spine. They realized they were trapped with no way out. Their efforts to uncover the mystery had ended with them becoming part of it. Josh, Liz, and Mia were forever trapped in those cabins, their souls joining those already there. And the cabins continued to wait for new curious victims who would one day find them and become part of this horrifying story too.